Holy moly, I can't lie, I did in fact let out a small giddish what the barnacles when I saw that Banjo Kazooie was coming to the Switch Online emulator thingy. I mean, the game is synonymous with the N64 right alongside of Mario, Ocarina of Time, and even Yoshi's Story. Although, for me, above all else, it was just cool to see the original version of the game re-released over 2 decades later. But since I do have the OG card and Xbox port on top of that, and can play them at any points, I wasn't exactly jumping out of my seat to go start up a new file. Yet, while everyone else was having a joyful time replaying this certified banger, I was sitting at home utterly pissed off. Why exactly? Well, it all has to do with this little promotional Switch news article that dropped when Banjo came to the service. Now, honestly, I found this quite charming. It's almost as if you're ripping a page straight out of a Nintendo Power from the 90s. It even uses that old render that makes Kazooie's legs look slightly too long and kinda disturbing. Nah, everything was fine and dandy until we got to this part. It all starts when the Wicked Witch Gruntilda kidnaps Tooie, Banjo's little sister. Banjo and Kazooie will need to use some fancy moves and a whole lot of eggs to get her back. Now, let me ask you, what the heck does a whole lot of eggs mean? Are we talking like 10, 20, 50, 100 even? You can't just say such a vague statement and expect no one to bat an eye. That's like when your friend asks to hold some of your Skittles, but there's always that brief awkward tension because you never know how many to actually give them, so you do that pour in their hand technique, but then you give them more than what you wanted, and now you barely have any left, and it's like, dang homie, you could have said you wanted like 3 or 4. Anyways, this line has bugged me ever since I first read it a couple of years ago by this point, so to spite it, it got me thinking. Can you beat Banjo Kazooie without using any eggs? No, you need some for the final boss. Alright, hold up 1 second. How many eggs does it take to beat Banjo Kazooie? I'm going to be fully transparent with you all. This idea was originally going to be a sort of joke spin on those challenge videos that were popular a few years back, and I guess even nowadays for some reason, until I quickly realized that while this topic may be funny on paper, in execution it really wasn't all that interesting for a majority of the run anyways. I had the choice of scrapping the whole shebang, yet something deep inside of my soul urged me not to, because if I did, then the question at hand would remain unanswered for the rest of time. Or until some other goofball had this dumb idea. So, despite my better judgment, I'm going to tackle this head on for science and stuff. Alright, so whether you've played the game or not, you probably already know that Banjo's partner in crime, Kazooie, is a bird. A red-crested breagle to be exact. And no, that's not a real-life species, don't look it up, you'll just get trolled by this 2012 Facebook page. Nice. Despite sort of playing second fiddle to Banjo, she's the only one out of the duo that actively learns new moves across the adventure. She literally carries Banjo on her back. These usually include typical bird activities like flying, turning invincible, and of course shooting out eggs, whether that be from her mouth or buttocks. But of course, that's exactly the thing we are looking to not do today, meaning that the only rule in this epic challenge is that I will not use any eggs whatsoever until I utterly have to. Pretty simple, right? Well, without a further ado, we start our journey to save our little sister at Banjo's home in Spiral Mountain. And what a good start it is, as we don't even know how to use eggs yet. This is essentially a tutorial area for learning the basic moves before jumping into Gruntilda's lair to start the real quest. So there's not much to do outside of collecting the honeycomb pieces scattered about. Unlike the Jiggies and notes that are crucial for progression, these honeycombs are the only extra collectibles that you don't need to beat the game, as they only serve to increase your overall health meter. At the start of this so-called challenge, I was determined to get every honeycomb I could without the use of eggs, but I kinda done diddly forgot about them soon after this because some of them are pretty tricky to remember where they're at. So just for the sake of information, know that you can get them all without eggs, with the exception of one in Mumbo's Mountain that I'll address a bit later on. Speaking of which, let's go ahead on on into Mumbo's very own mountain. As the first real level of the game, the difficulty is anything but. Each world has a total of 10 Jiggies to nab, to which a ton of them here are laying out in the open, waiting to be swiped up. Now, this isn't some sort of IGN walkthrough, so I won't be going over every objective. Just know that the ones I skim over are relatively easy to get with our Huevo restriction. Although, this is where we finally learn how to use them, or at least have the option to anyways. I was so confident that I'd be fine without them that I passed over bottles and went about my business. I do have to say, from my past experiences playing BK, while eggs aren't in the talon trot or flying category of godlike usefulness, they do come in handy as an offensive projectile, so not having them throughout the game definitely felt like something was missing, but nothing unmanageable. Even though I was swiftly reminded of the drawbacks of that decision when trying to fight Conga. This dude can tank bird pecks to the eyeball just fine, but calls it quits after a couple of eggs? Whatever, him and Mumbo's Juju statues that hunger for blue stones are the two Jiggies I had to skip on. I should also mention that a little over half of the game's levels feature Mumbo transformations that are tied to collecting a good handful of these skull tokens. I had a slight concern about this since the transformations are needed for multiple Jiggies and even overworld hub progression at a certain point, though good for us, they're usually hidden among the open, so I was able to get plenty. Thus, with the power of the termite, I got the rest of the 100 notes and scurried my way to Treasure Trove Cove. But not before Bottles gave me some lip about having to learn all his moves or we wouldn't get that far. Well, we will see about that. The sunny skies and cool ocean breeze as a sight to behold. But okay, along this point in the playthrough is where I started to have doubts about the challenge. The problem was not so much that I wouldn't be able to complete it, rather that I would complete it just too easily. It's 100% certainly my fault for having the one restriction not be that impactful towards moment-to-moment gameplay, since the method to obtain most Jiggies under normal circumstances is rather cut and dry in terms of whether you need eggs or not. There wasn't much I could do to circumvent or outmaneuver the need for those eggs. It's not like a no-jump challenge where the rules are constantly in place, affecting you at every chance. For example, the only unattainable Jiggy here in TTC is the watery puzzle where you have to patch up Leaky the Bucket to be able to do the word puzzle on the drained sandcastle's floor. Case in point, there is no possible way to bypass the need to use the eggs on the bucket, though I did get a murmur of excitement because you can enter the sandcastle when it's still underwater and make contact with the letters on the ground with your beak buster. Except it's just that nothing happens until it is drained, sadly. Outside of a few cases where I could get a little swifty, a majority of the challenge went as follows. Go into a new level and get most of the Jiggies except for one, maybe two, and most, if not all, 100 of the notes without much issue. Although, I did pick up on the fact that if I am skipping out on even a single Jiggy per level, that would add up over time. This ain't no Mario 64 where you can bypass a good chunk of the stars and still beat the game. Banjo Kazooie is, for better or worse, kinda hardcore when it comes to how much stuff you have to collect. You'll need 94 out of the 100 Jiggies and 810 out of the 900 notes for the bare minimum access to the end boss Gruntilda. So, safe to say there's not much wiggle room to be skipping lots of stuff all willy-nilly. Now, it's not quite that simple as there are tons of progression blockers all across the hub world to make sure you're, playing the game. These come in the form of note doors to reach new rooms across the layer, and painting puzzles where you use collected Jiggies to unlock the various stages. For example, to even be able to get into Treasure Trove Cove, you'd have to have at least 50 notes and a whopping 2 Jiggies from Mumbo's Mountain. This bar certainly rises when you get deeper into the game, but for now, like I said, the next 3 levels were much the same. Clanker's Cavern, Bubblegoop Swamp, and Freezeezy Peak all had one Jiggy that demanded us to cough over some precious eggs. Clanker's was interesting as it's the first level to have a semi-complicated design centered around going in and out of Clanker, Gruntilda's living garbage disposal. There's multiple ways to get into him, most of which are as easy as swimming or dropping inside his gills or blowhole. The third passageway requires us to knock down his aching teeth, And at this point, I'm convinced that Kazooie's eggs are made out of concrete because pecking the tooth does nothing, yet a couple of eggs does? Well, thankfully all of his innards are connected, so even though we can't get this tooth Jiggy, we can still get over into that room to nab the last few notes to get the full 100. I'm grasping at straws here, but there's this Jiggy kept behind this metal grate that normally I would shoot some eggs at to break, since the platform you're at is lined up perfectly for it, although you can just jump over and give it the old rat-a-tat-rap to free it. And yeah, I'm talking like the Jiggies are sentient, because they actually are. A good rule of thumb for the world of Banjo is to assume almost everything is alive, somehow. And also keep in mind that after grabbing one, Kazooie proceeds to eat them. Bubble Gloop Swamp is an underrated level in my onion, yet it found a way to instantly rub me the wrong way from the moment I stepped in by getting an eyeful of this thing. It's an ongoing Jiggy objective that wants us to feed these crocodile statues that keep spawning all over the level. Obviously, we can't be doing all that, so onwards to the fan favorite Freeze Easy Peak. At first, I thought this would be our first clean sweep level. Instead, I was blocked by something so minuscule that I was more peeved over how silly it was than not being able to get the Jiggy. So, for this multi-step process, we first have to save these Twinklies from getting gobbled up by the Munchers, which honestly feels like you should be rewarded a Jiggy just for that. Anyways, afterward, we fly up and pass through the tree star 3 times before the timer is up, and only then can you climb up all the way inside the tree for the Jiggy. The only problem here, you have to turn on the tree via this switch after saving the Twinklies, and can you take a guess at what does and doesn't work? Why you can't hit it with Kazooie's beak bewilders me. And yeah, I used the word bewildered, what about it? Regardless, we're 5 levels in and we're doing golden, blasting through any and all note doors and Jiggy paintings with ease. That was until the egg hit the fan with Gobi's freaking Valley. A big reason as to why it's been all peaches and cream up until now is the fact that most of the game's early levels are rather open and free to explore as you wish by simply walking around with the occasional tricky-to-reach sub-area. Even if you couldn't get a specific Jiggy, you could usually still travel every inch of the world. The latter half of the game certainly complicates things by designing way more of these smaller sub-areas that are either easy to miss or are flat out gatekept by a certain action you gotta do to get inside. Gobi's Valley is a prime example of just that, with the real meat of the stage being comprised of numerous ancient pyramid and tomb structures, which makes perfect sense for the level theme and whatnot, but getting into them is a mixed bag. Some are as simple as hitting a switch and racing the clock, one needs you to bash yourself into a target up in the sky, and others sadly need some eggs. Feeding these statues on the wall will uprise the ancient tomb of King Sandy Butts. I feel I have to emphasize that's his actual name every time I bring him up, because yes, that's his actual name. Additionally, to get inside Jinxie, the large sphinx, you have to help a brother out by unblocking his nose by inserting even more stuff into his nose. I'm not sure how that works exactly, but obviously that's a no-go for us. However, through the power of faulty collision, we can actually clip our way into Jinxie without the need of any eggs. Yeah, don't get your hopes up too much though, as on the inside, to reach the Jiggy, you have to feed these other Sphinx statues to make the magical carpets rise up to the sky. So close, yet so far. This level was definitely the first big slap to the face, given I already knew how many Jiggies we were allowed to miss, and all of a sudden, here's a whopping 4 we couldn't get. Aside from the 2 areas I've already mentioned, there's some trouble with another pyramid that we can get into normally, yet to be able to get the Jiggy inside, we have to bait out this snake with some eggs to shoot up to the ceiling. I can't believe I'd ever say this, but I wish we were playing some Donkey Kong 64 so we could moon kick our way up there. On second thought, never mind. Lastly, one set of Jiggies in particular that kinda had me sweating from the start thinking about it has to do with those 5 magical little creature dudes who are hidden across every world, the Jinjos. It doesn't seem so bad until you realize that if even just a single one of them are put in a spot where I can't grab them without eggs, that means I have to throw out the entire Jiggy. And Gobi's Valley is the first level to prove my worries right. 2 of these goobers are put into those hard to get into areas. The Jinxie pyramid that I clipped into won't work since the little fella is on a magic carpet high in the air, and the sandy butt pyramid is entirely off limits, so rip them.
But I'm not done yet!
Because we can't get into Sandy Butt's pyramid, we can't hit this world's grunty switch. These are little buttons you can press in every level to reveal a Jiggy in the overworld hub. Obviously that amounts to an extra 9 Jiggies, so hitting these are basically a must. However, luck is in our favor, as the devs seemingly didn't test how absurdly easy it is to jank this specific one. So after hitting the switch in Gobies, this coffin opens up in the lair, except there's an extremely easy exploit you can do by jumping up on it and just kind of rolling into it, and you clip far enough inside that you grab the Jiggy. Except they kind of fixed this in the Xbox port, which I'm currently playing on for reasons yet to be revealed. Except it's still stupidly easy to exploit because you can still extend Kazooie far enough inside by shooting out a forward-facing egg. And the best part is that the animation of getting the Jiggy interrupts the action of shooting out the egg. Except I didn't actually learn how to shoot eggs back at Mumbo's Mountain, and I don't feel quite ready to do the long walk of shame back. So just forget about that for now. Another problematic switch that has a more concrete roadblock is Freeze Easy Peaks. Now, it's easy to find and hit the switch with no issue. However, the Jiggy spawns way up outside the level entrance. What you're expected to do is hit this flight pad switch to spawn one over in the other room, and then obviously fly up to it. Sounds nice and easy, until you find out that the pad is located underneath one of those cobwebs that only takes eggs to break apart. So we are out of luck on that. In the face of these failures, on the bright side, I feel like I should take a moment to be thankful that there's no super strict requirements needing eggs to make progress through the layer itself. Shoutouts to that Banjo Kazooie no Kazooie challenge I saw that I got whacked by this steep slope like 20 minutes into the game that you need Talentron for. Some ideas are better left in the drafts, though I suppose I can't be talking. These cobwebs are the only barrier in the entire layer that you specifically need eggs to remove. And outside of that flight pad, the only other thing they block is a cauldron shortcut for fast travel, but that's more of a luxury than a necessity. I guess I had Tooie on the mind, where you do have to shoot a fire egg to make it to Witchy World. I wonder how many eggs it takes to beat that game. Well, I'll find out hopefully never. Anywho, we're going back to a fairly easy level with not much going on in terms of our eggless challenge. Mad Monster Mansion is home to these potty-mouthed pots that need our eggs to grow. At first, I was going to make another joke about what the heck is going on here, but apparently eggs do help boost soil nutrients, so it checks out. I did have a brief scare with this world's grunty switch due to it spawning its Jiggy in the eyeball of this giant Gruntilda doorway in the same cobweb room I mentioned earlier. Yet instead of using the intended inaccessible flight pad to beak bomb straight into the glass eyeball, you can easily get up on her hat and do a sneaky feathery flap to reach the tip of her nose. Thankfully, the glass can still be broken with a simple rat-a-tat rap, thus making way for a sweet Jiggy. Admittedly, it wasn't the craziest alternate way to get a Jiggy by any means, though I was still pretty proud of thinking of this on the spot. But now we go on to the objectively best level of the game, Rusty Bucket Bay. In a funny, surprising twist, despite the level's casual reputation, it is the only one in the entire game where you can get everything without using a single egg, which was kinda ironic to me given how the level is set up. So as you may surmise, there's the Rusty Bucket ship in the middle where most of the action takes place, but the outer perimeter is filled with smaller areas that hold plenty of collectibles. In an attempt to help avoid the toxic water in which the ship is docked, you can pay tolls to raise walkable platforms to get around the entire border. What do you pay with, you may ask? Why, eggs, of course. Now, for a vast majority of the level, these aren't needed since there's multiple ladders that help give you a boost out of the water onto these outer parts. Except for one at the very end, and wouldn't you know it, our little orange Jinjo friend is stuck up there. The toll to get over there normally is an outrageous 8 eggs. No way in heck are we paying that much, so there has to be another way. At first I thought, well, maybe we can jump off of the giant crane. Yet, even from way up there, I already knew it was a tad bit too far. No matter what kind of combinations of jumps, you'll come up short. And unfortunately, the top of these buildings have an invisible wall blocking it, so we can't jump on that and then to the Jinjo. It's almost as if through his desperate cries for help from enslavement, he's mocking us. I felt defeated until I realized I was simply overthinking things. The wall underneath where the toll bridge comes out is slanted, and most slants in BK give you a good second or so before it puts you in a slide-off state. In fact, some parts of the game expect this of you. That's barely enough time to jump up and flip-flap our way just high enough to get onto the platform. Hallelujah. The final level, Click Clock Wood, is when you know it's more the same. This level is proving the egg soil thing right by making us grow this giant flower through the seasons, which we are not gonna do. Other than that, there's not much to point out besides those dag-blasted 4 notes in Mumbo's hut during the fall. I swear I miss these like every single time I play this game because you don't have to come in here outside of the spring season, as Mumbo always has some sort of excuse not to transform you again. So I always get to the end of the level in the winter and I'm stuck at 96 notes, but I'm so close to the end of the game that looking all around for them won't change much, yet it still pisses me off how I technically only completed like 99% of the game. But no more, I say. If nothing else, I made it a point to burn this information into my mind this time. Yeah, with that, we've made it through every single level in the game without a single roadblock. Did I expect this? Honestly, not really. I totally thought there'd at least be a few points where we'd have to backtrack for more notes or jiggies, though it just never happened. In fact, that was the main reason I played on the Xbox version of the game, so I wouldn't have to recollect any notes after re-entering levels when need be. It ended up not mattering at all outside of the few times I took a death, yet I'm gonna blame that on not paying attention as much as I normally would, since I actually do prefer the N64's note system, but that's a whole other topic for another day. Time to crash through Grunty's Furnace Fun game show and take home our prize of a little sister. I was pretty fortunate to not get a Grunty question on any of the skull spaces that instantly kill you, so I got through it all lickety-split, and look at those credits. That means the end. Psych, it's a fake ending that lasts like 8 minutes on Xbox. Golly! Grunty is still out there waiting and deserving of a beatdown, and we're the only ones who can dish it out. Climbing up towards the top of the castle, we reach the last note door of the game, the infamous 810. And we easily crush it by having 882, not even counting the 4 notes I missed in Click Clock Wood that I went back for afterwards. Notes were honestly not that big of an issue whatsoever. We were able to get nearly all of them in the entire game. It truly only came down to those few areas in Gobies that we couldn't get into, and even then, we still got a vast majority of them aside from that. But with that out of the way, we set our eyes on one more painting on the wall. Do we have enough Jiggies to make her fall? Believe it or not, no. We've reached the literal final hurdle aside from fighting Grunty herself, and only now have we come up short. I don't think I stand alone in saying that this final painting was a bane for every child alike playing this game for the first time. To come so far, only to come up so short of filling out this portrait of the ugly hag herself. Truly ironic. A valiant effort has left us with 86 out of the possible 100 Jiggies across the whole game without using a single egg. But now we may have to. Keep in mind that we're not going for all 100 here, as we only need 8 out of the remaining 14 to finish filling her painting. So this is where it finally gets a little interesting. I went ahead and mapped out every remaining Jiggy across the game and calculated the correlating amount of eggs that is needed to get them, and in order of first appearance, they are the Conga Fight with 7 eggs, the Juju Statues with 4 eggs, the Watery Puzzle with 2 eggs, the Golden Tooth with 3 eggs, Feed the Croctus with 5 eggs, Light the Christmas Tree with 3 eggs, Freeze Easy's Grunty Switch with 3 eggs, Inside of Jinxie's Tomb normally takes 9 eggs, but with the Jinxie clip, it's only 3. Inside King Sandybut's tomb with 9 eggs, the Snake Charmer with 5 eggs, Gobi's Jinjos is tricky since you need access to Jinxie's first layer, which takes 1 egg, and Sandybut's tomb, which takes 9 eggs, yet assuming I did go for these 2 Jiggies, these eggs for the Jinjos wouldn't be recounted since I'd already be going to those places anyways. Gobi's Grunty Switch, I need access to Sandybut's tomb to be able to hit the switch in the first place, Mad Monster Mansion's Flower Pots with 5 eggs, and Growing the Flower in Click Clock Wood with 5 eggs. Okay, so at this point, it would be logical to look at this list and get the 8 Jiggies that take the least amount of eggs. And yes, you would be right to think that, but little do you know, I may have some tricks of trickery up my sleeve. Let's talk about some glitches. Banjo Kazooie over the course of the last half decade or so has been progressively getting more and more broken. It's not to the same degree as, say, Mario 64 or Ocarina, yet there's been some massive discoveries that have helped break this game for some truly amazing skips. Outside of that Gobi clip earlier, I've been a bit hesitant on even bringing this side of the game up since we've been able to progress so smoothly. Although now that our backs are up against the wall, it's time to get a little dirty. The first of these I should mention is the dog skip, and yes, if you thought the game itself had dumb names for stuff, the glitches follow suit. This allows us to skip past the door of Grunty, and doing so will let us bypass the need to fill in any of the final Grunty puzzle painting. Meaning that if we did this, technically we would need 0 eggs to reach the final boss. You may think, awesome, that's the whole point of the video, right? And, well, yeah, on one hand, I probably should do this, but there's 2 big reasons as to why I chose not to. For one, it's like pretty dang hard to pull off if you don't know what you're doing, and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm pretty sure it's gotta be near pixel perfect, and I can't, man. But secondly, this feels a little disingenuous. Mainly because the challenge has been so vanilla feeling so far, and now that we actually have to do some egg management, we just skip it? Nah, for the sake of the video, let's still get enough Jiggies to fill out the Grunty painting and do this the intended way. On that note, let me introduce something even more unintended and broken, Beat Banjo. Practically speaking, a majority of the transformations across the game are rather lacking. They all just kind of walk around slowly and do their thing, but the bee can fly. Mumbo was definitely right in calling this his best one yet, as this obviously makes Banjo extremely versatile, as if you had access to a flight pad at any time, which, if you can imagine, breaks certain levels that didn't have them originally. Now, only if there was a way to transport Beat Banjo into these certain other levels. Turns out there is, which is why I brought it up in the first place. Look, I'm not any sort of expert to be explaining how these glitches work, though I'll try my best to summarize. So, the devs had to think ahead to prevent the player from being able to take any of the transformations outside of their designated levels and into the rest of the layer. Thus, there's specific parameters set up to trigger a D transformation back into regular old Banjo and Kazooie if you cross them. Most of the time, these are set up not too far from the level entrances, as a lot of the transformations have extra things to do in the hub worlds. The bee being no exception, as you need it to nab Click Clock Wood's Grunty Switch Jiggy. Because of this, you have free reign of the lobby to goof off in. However, Banjo glitch expert Chronikies discovered that if you perform a precise series of movements involving walking up to this cauldron shortcut connected to the lobby, as Mumbo is trying to turn you back into regular Banjo, the cutscene showing off the other cauldron interrupts the D transformation, leaving you as the bee even outside of the intended barrier, allowing you access to a majority of the rest of the layer and by extension other levels. There's only one teensy tiny huge problem. Aside from being really difficult to pull off, you can only do this if the cauldron is still asleep, meaning that the cutscene that is the glitch's crutch is still intact. And I went in and woke him up before I even considered doing this, so yeah. Luckily, there's an alternate method involving the 765 note door where you can clip through it to get out of bounds and make your way over to the cauldron. But it's equally important that you haven't deactivated the note door yet for it to work. And I did that already too. Luckily, there's a third option that was found later on that you can do at any point called the boob. A recurring character I've yet to talk about up until now is Gruntilda's sister Bruntilda. You could say she's a bit of a black sheep compared to the rest of her family, as she's not downright despicable, and even dishes out all the juicy gossip about her disgusting sibling that plays a part in the aforementioned climatic fiery game show. Visiting her on your first playthrough is funny, no doubt, but after that she's fairly useless since you'll probably end up forgetting what she told you, and she's always hanging out in slightly out of the way spots in the lair. Yet, that is exactly the reason how she came in super clutch by being in Click Clockwood's lobby, sorta wedged in the corner of this huge tree and wall. Coming out here with Beat Banjo and flying all the way up to the ceiling directly above her and dropping with a precise angle will clip us straight through the floor and out of bounds. Again, I'm not a glitch expert. All I know is that it has to do with the massive speed buildup you gain by falling from that height, while using Bruntilda's hurtbox to forcefully clip us through the ground, as the game doesn't handle going that fast all too well. This trick isn't that hard to do in the grand scheme of gaming glitches, especially compared to something like a bit clip or the dog. After a solid 20 to 30 minutes, I was able to pull it off somewhat consistently. Alright, now that we have finally freed our bee self to the world, what exactly was the point in doing all of this? Well, if we take a look back at our remaining Jiggies list, you may recall that there's a few of these that we couldn't get purely due to them being too high in the sky for normal Banjo to reach. So, you may know where I'm headed with this. The air. Remember that pain in the tushy cobweb that blocked the flight pad? I say bahooey with that and scurry our way up there without it. A funny fact is that you technically don't even need to hit the grunty switch to lower this part of the advent calendar to reveal the Jiggy, as the bee clips far enough inside to be able to touch it and thus collect it just by hugging against the wall. If you couldn't tell by now, the bee is really broken. Another example of this is the Gobi's Valley grunty switch having to do with that overworld coffin that we put to the side earlier. I didn't necessarily need the bee for this, but since we already have him, we can fly into the head area and grab that Jiggy all easy peasy. Making our way back into the actual Gobi's Valley, we can finally partially redeem ourselves. With an even easier clip into Jinxie due to a bee's natural resistance to piping hot quicksand, we can ignore those magical carpets and fly our way up to the Jiggy. I went ahead and grabbed the orange Jinjo that was here too, even though we won't be able to fully save his brethren due to Sandy Butt's tomb still not being risen without shooting those eggs. With nothing being loaded in yet, there's not anything we can clip into, so those two Jiggies are still off the table. Interestingly, the pyramid that holds that fourth Jiggy that we skimped on, we could get into with regular Banjo, and the golden puzzle piece is even already spawned. It's just too high in the air for us to reach. The problem is we can't exactly waltz our way in there since you need to beak bomb this target to open up the pyramid. However, never fear, since walls in N64 games are usually mere suggestions. Using the top of this doorway, you're able to squeeze right through the wall out of bounds and fly to the entrance, similar to how we got into Jinxie. Now, I have to take a moment to be honest with you all. I tried to perform this clip for about 30 minutes and I simply could not get it for the life of me. It didn't help that I still had Gobi hanging out over here and I was honestly boobed out of my mind, so eventually I said forget it and got this Jiggy the normal way. But I will not be counting these eggs towards my total. You can call me out for this, call me a fraud, whatever, yet in my defense, this entire video is absurdly arbitrary anyways, so look at the footage, you can get this Jiggy with the bee easily, it's just that I suck. With those 4 extra Jiggies collected, there are sadly no more that I know of that we can cheese with the bee. Thus, the time has come for the inevitable walk of shame back to Mumbo's Mountain to finally learn the way of the egg. Even though they're still off limits, something about having the ability to use them again just feels so right. Eggs are a defining feature of Banjo and Kazooie's moveset. That's like having Mario without his crouching, crawl, kick thingy. Everybody loved doing that, right? After marking off the B Jiggies, we are down to 4 more that we need to complete Grunty's painting, and it's pretty clear which of the remaining 10 we are gunning for. Those hungry Jujus can be served at last with our first usage of eggs. There's 4 parts to the statue that only need 1 egg apiece to be satisfied and disappear from existence? Not that it matters too much, but a common mistake I always made was feeding all 4 of them back to back without pausing after the 3rd one to grab the level's 2nd honeycomb piece, which, if you remember, was the only one we couldn't nab the first go around. And especially easy lick is helping our bucket friend in Treasure Trove Cove. Poop 2 pebbles into his mouth area, I guess, and watch the water be drained. I never got how that worked, like, Leaky isn't connected to that body of water as far as I can tell, so what does patching his hole do exactly? The water just kinda seeps into the sand underneath. I'm not sure if it works like that aside from Leaky having powers outside of human comprehension. Once inside the sandcastle, the word puzzle is as easy as can be, and since we have the Wonder Wing from a later level by now, I thought I'd make it a point to murk the black snippet who's guarding the Jiggy before he even got done talking to us. Nice. Helping our other poor friend Clanker almost didn't come to be. See, he complains about his aching teeth, which takes 3 eggs to crack down each. The key word being teeth and not tooth, meaning that this should turn into a 6-egg ordeal, right? Well, thankfully for our sake, but not so much his, we only need to bust down his right tooth to get the Jiggy, as the left tooth only nets you a mere mumbo token. Yeah, sorry about that, buddy. Hang in there. For our last Jiggy, let's finish out with some Christmas spirit in January by using 3 eggs to turn on this tree. Again, this was definitely the most surprising usage of eggs, since I swear we should be able to hit the switch ourselves, but I digress. There we have it, a total of 94 Jiggies collected with only using 12 eggs. Was it more than you thought? Was it less? I honestly had no clue going into this, so I can't say either way. Though, hold your horses as we're not done yet. We still have the big bad herself to put down, and this is where things take a turn for the worse. So, towards the beginning of this video, I already put the notion out there that we do indeed need eggs to beat the final boss. I wasn't lying or anything by any means, it's just that I wasn't exactly sure how many we needed, and it's a lot. The first phase is simple enough. Wait for her to zoom past you and peck her bum a couple of times. A pro strat actually involves using eggs to double the damage, though we've come this far to not fold, so we're keeping it noob-only gameplay out here. Her second phase is the first hiccup, as she stations herself way too far out from us to be able to hit her with anything but eggs. Even if we could go out there and peck her, we'd instantly fall to our doom. She'll transition over to another part of the castle 4 different times after getting hit 3 times, amounting to 12 needed eggs. And we're not even halfway done with the fight. Bruh. The third phase gives us a slight break due to it being centered around flights. But right after, we're getting slammed again as Jinjo statues rise from the ground. You gotta shoot 3 eggs into each of the 4 statues to awaken and send them flying towards Grunty, which is another 12 eggs spent.
But I'm not done yet!
Finally, the final phase shows us no mercy as another Jinjo statue rises in the center. Yet this isn't an ordinary Jinjo. No, this is the Jinjonator. He has 4 separate holes needing 5 eggs each. 5 freaking eggs. Wow. Don't get me wrong, this is one of my favorite final bosses in gaming, period. The Jinjos coming in to help you is such a fulfilling feeling after spending the whole game saving them, yet in terms of this eggless challenge, those little twerps have officially ruined my day. In total, this fight needs a bare minimum of 44 eggs to beat. This is nearly 4 times as many eggs as we used the entire adventure leading up to Grunty. To say I got kablammed would be the understatement of the century. So as we watch Gruntilda fall from her castle, we can tally up the results and reflect on our journey. To beat Banjo Kazooie with the help of a boob, you'll need 56 eggs, but if you're willing to use a dog skip, you will only need 44 eggs. I want you to say that to any sane person and see how they respond. So, is this what you would call a whole lot of eggs? Honestly, not really. I mean, I guess it depends on how you look at it. In the context of like a normal playthrough, I'd say I usually use way more than that since, like I've said, they are good for combat and whatnot, plus getting the remaining Jiggies we skipped over all need eggs too, so 56 isn't that many, but if you're talking in real life, that's a whole nother story. I've worked in a grocery store at different points in my life, and golly, do those people love talking about some damn egg prices. It's like, dag man, we get it, they're high, outrageous even, but those bums wouldn't stop talking about it. It was an everyday occurrence, like, just don't buy the eggs or talk about something else, please. Alright, well, there you go, the end. Subscribe if you've ever eaten an egg before. Next time on Matt Trash Boat Video Game Challenges, we're gonna see if you can beat the original Punch-Out without throwing a single punch.